What's up, guys? I'm Deanna, if you didn't know, and welcome back to our channel. Today our video is going to be a little bit different. Today I'm bringing you the 5 photography tips for beginners. Now, I know you didn't think I was going to give you the tips because if you look at my photos, they suck. So today I'm bringing in reinforcement. My girl, Anna Lee. Anna is the bomb, okay? I've known her since 2013 and she's been professional since 2005. Just kidding, I made that up. I don't know, I feel like she was born a photographer. So there's that. Anyway, I'm gonna put all of her information down in our description, but Anna's taken my graduation photos when I graduated from college. She took our engagement photos. She took all of our wedding photos, and she's just really professional and really talented. So Anna's gonna be the one who gives you all the goods, okay? So let's go.
So
This look natural.
So your first tip when you're setting up your settings on your camera is you want to shoot in RAW. And the reason for that being is it's a larger file size. So when you go into post-processing, you're going to be able to push and pull your contrasted highlights and shadows. And it'll give you more wiggle room where if you underexpose or overexpose a photo, you can correct it post-processing without losing all of the quality. Whenever you're shooting and you're trying to learn photography from scratch, you want to make sure your setting is on manual, which for a lot of companies, it'll just have a giant M right here. And that'll allow you to take control over basically all of the settings on the camera. And what that does is in any scenario, any situation, once you know how to utilize your camera to its fullest capacity, basically you'll be able to customize all of your images. So there are 3 main components to shooting on manual. It's your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. And your ISO is going to say something like ISO 100, 400. It'll have a number next to it. You want to make sure that your ISO is not on auto. That will mess up your photos in the long run. The first thing I do when I flip my camera on, put it on manual, put it on RAW, is I will check my ISO and I'll look around and I'll see, is it really sunny outside? Am I indoors in a dark room? If it's really sunny outside, you want to make sure your ISO is at a lower number, which means it's not taking in as much light and it's not going to be as sensitive. If you're shooting in a low light area, like a party, a club, you're going to want to jack your ISO up so you can get all of those details. Now,
This is a tip and a half. Okay, you're welcome.
This is a long tip. So after your ISO, I will usually jump to my aperture, and the aperture is going to have f1.8 and up. It's going to always start with an F, and your aperture controls the amount of light that is let into the camera. So the lower your aperture is, so you have f1.8, the lower depth of field you're going to have, which means you're going to have a little bit in focus and a lot blurred out. And that blurry background is called bokeh. So if you're shooting a detailed shot, like an earring or a wedding ring or a flower, and you want that really dreamy look, you're gonna wanna lower your f-stop to f1.8 or however low your camera will go. And that'll make sure that you have a really nice blurred out background. So the last thing that I'll adjust on my settings is the shutter speed. And the shutter speed is going to determine your light, like how much light you're letting in at one time when you press the shutter button. So if your ISO and your aperture are set for the look that you want with the photo, essentially the last thing to set is your shutter speed. So if your photo is too bright at this point, you're gonna wanna increase your shutter speed. So that's going to darken the image and bring your exposure into balance. If it's too dark, you wanna lower it, but don't lower it too much. Because if you lower it before 1/60th of a second, essentially you're going to have a lot of camera shake, and your body, when you're holding the camera, your hands naturally have movement even if you keep them really, really still. So it's really important to have 1/60th of a second and up. And if you drop it down that low and your exposure is still a little wonky, that's up to you to decide if you want to increase your ISO, decrease it, or mess around with your aperture. So for portraits, when you're shooting someone and their face is looking directly at you in the camera, or you have their eyes in focus somewhere, you want to make sure that their eyes are in focus, or at least one of them is in focus. That's your main focus point when you have a person in your frame. And typically with portraits, it depends on the person. I mean, you guys are comfortable with each other, but if you're shooting like a stranger, or you want to, interview someone on the street or something, it usually takes about 15 to 20 minutes for people to let their guard down in front of a camera. So just being like engaging is an important part of that, making them feel comfortable. But I'm trying to think, you want to avoid hot spots, and I mean, like, I'm white as shit, so it's hard to look.
Tip number 1, I'm white as shit.
My entire skin is like a hot spot, but it's basically like if someone's sweating and they have like a big glare or whatever, you want to adjust for highlights. It's easier to bring shadows up than it is to bring highlights down, because you can only bring highlights down so much. And even if you bring them all the way down, your photo's going to look like shit if they're blown out. So you want to make sure, if you're not sure of the correct exposure, adjust for your highlights. And this can go for landscape photography too. So if you're like shooting this field and your sky is super blown out, but you want your clouds to be visible in the photo, you're basically going to expose for your clouds. Now down here, it's going to be really dark, but you can always bring that up in post-processing.
This is why we're shooting raw, right?
Yes, yeah. And another way to do this is called bracketing, where essentially you shoot for the sky. So like you adjust your settings for shooting for the sky to make sure your clouds and all that are showing. And then you're going to go up a stop, and you're going to shoot again, and then you're going to go up one more stop and shoot again. So that's giving you a range of exposure that in post-processing you can kind of layer them and get those details.
Don't look at them, I'm ashamed.
No, let me see. Skies are hard. I always blow my skies out, but...
I'm ashamed.
No, that's good. That's really good, Deanna. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. That's really good.
How?
Because look at that. You have all the details in the sky, and you still are catching detail with the tree down here.
I feel like it would have been boring without
and then
the tree.
You did the tree here. You did exactly what I was talking about. Yeah. Oh.
No.
No, let me see. Let me see. What was that?
No. Let me see it. Okay.
That looks good. Let me see. That's a good portrait.
Great, that was perfect.
Sorry. I didn't realize you were taking
Zoom it out, let's take it. Wow. You are, ooh. Yes, girl, work
I'm
it.
terrible.
No, you're not. Ooh. Ooh. You don't have no hot spot.
So our next tip, we're going to talk about composition, which is essentially what is in your frame. And a good way to think about this is the positive versus negative space in your frame. Your positive space is going to be your subject matter, and the negative space is going to be the background. So we have this tree over here, and we're going to do some examples.
So the tree would be the positive, and the background would be the negative.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there are a few tips to create a balanced composition. You might have heard of the rule of thirds to make sure that your subject matter or your positive space is divvied up evenly in your frame. I often, when I am with beginner shooters, they tend to shoot diagonally to get a cool angle. It ends up looking like something from a 90s rock band. Don't do it. It's very outdated. Yeah, so, and there are some other things, like if you're working with organically shaped objects, which would be flowers, circles, something that isn't very structured. So the opposite of like cityscape. You might want to balance that with something that's a lot more solid. And then the other big thing is that naturally a lot of us tend to read an image from left to right, especially in Western culture. So the left part of your image might need to be a little bit more engaging or heavy, looking into the frame through the right side of the image. This will create just a more engaging composition. No, just whatever you think like looks.
Are you more important than the tree?
Humans are more important than trees in this instance.
Okay.
Dogs are more important than humans, so no, I'm just kidding. So like you might, like if I'm standing like this, like that's probably gonna look awkward, right? But if I'm like on the left side of the frame looking this way, that creates some movement through the image. Yeah. And feel free to direct me too, Deanna.
Oh, okay.
This is your photo.
So, I don't know how to direct people. It's like you're about to do the sprinkler. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah.
Like this ponytail. That's right.
You look like you're about to just fly away.
Yeah, those are good. All right, so another tip is lenses. A lot of things I'll hear from beginners, they'll buy a kit or a kit camera that'll come with a couple different lenses. And they're trying to replicate photos that they see in magazines or on YouTube or on Instagram. And a lot of times you're not gonna be able to get the same quality photos with kit lenses. There's nothing wrong with them, but you just need to know how a lens operates. So this is an example of a kit lens. This looks like a great lens. Is it a good lens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or kit lens.
Yeah, no, it'll get the job done. And there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing that you'll find why these are cheaper is because they have a higher starting aperture at 3.5, meaning if you want the really nice bokeh, if you want the dreamy look, you're not gonna have that low aperture to give you that. So this is a great starting lens, but if you're ready for something a little bit more artsy, this is also a 35mm lens, and this is 1.4. Actually, I think this is 40, but they're close.
This one's 1.8.
Yeah, so this is a 35 too. And this is 1.8. And you can see just the difference in it. This will have a longer barrel on it, and it'll feel a little bit heavier. Sometimes a lot of kit lenses will have like a plasticky feel to them. But anyways, the main point here is that lenses matter. They matter almost more than your camera body. You can have an outdated camera body and a really great lens, and you can still get awesome photos. And you don't need a lot. A lot of issues that I'll see with photographers that are just starting out. So want to get a bunch of gear and a bunch of filters, and that's not going to make you any better if you don't know how to use it and you don't know how to be resourceful.
Very true.
So know your lenses, do your research. I always try and go for 1.4, 1.8 lenses. they are a lot pricier, but if this is something you find yourself being like a more professional or a hobbyist in, it's definitely worth it. These will last you a long time. If you're second guessing getting insurance on it, always get insurance on it.
Lawrence.
Always get insurance on it. Square Trade is really great. And it'll cover drop-in spills for like the first 2 to 3 years. I've used my insurance a handful of times, and it just saves you a ton of money. And a lot of heartache,
Yeah.
and wallet ache. So
Your voice cracked a little, like you've experienced this before.
oh, I have. My primary camera is in the shop right now. So did I use my insurance on it? I sure did. That shit was $3,000. So long story short, invest in really good lenses. When you come time to get like a new body, obviously invest in that too, but lenses are what make your image. Something that's really hard for beginners, even for myself, I've been doing this for I think like 7 years now, is posing. And it's something that you're gonna continually learn and get better at. So baby steps are the best way to start out with this. And learning the confidence to direct people as well. So a lot of people, when they get in front of the camera, this is what I hear 99% of the time. They stand there like this and they're like, what do I do with my hands? And it really depends, you know, when you're working with a client or another person, and you really get to know them or get to know what they want out of the photos. How do they want to be portrayed? A lot of times I'll ask people, do they have a preferred side, a preferred profile side? Do they have any insecurities that they don't want to capture or that they want to hide? And it's really finding what is most flattering for that individual, and everyone is different. So a couple things to note that a lot of people, no matter who they are or how they identify, how they stand, is a lot of times, and women will do this too, they'll have a gated stance. And this is not very flattering for a lot of reasons. And whoever it is that's standing like this, you know, this is one thing to look for when you're shooting full frame, full body, is you want to have just sort of a softer stance, bring their legs together, kind of like twist their hip, bring their shoulder back. If they have another individual in the frame, they're going to be facing each other. Or perhaps one person's in front, another person's kind of in the back, creating layered composition in the image. Another thing to watch out for with posing and just details in general, anyone with long hair, that stuff will get in your face all the time, and it's an editing nightmare. So if you notice it in your frame, don't be afraid to step in there and be like, hey, let me fix your hair really quick. Just pull it out of their face, out of, you know, their eyes, stuff like that. It'll save you so much time post-processing. Another thing, you know, people are like, what do I do with my hands? Hands are a small detail, but they say a lot. Like 90% of communication is done through body language, and a lot of that is through your hands. I talk with my hands a lot. I'm very like feminine with my hands, but placement of the hands is important. So if someone's going for like a power stance, say they're getting like a corporate headshot done, and they want to have a more confident stance, you might have them place their hand like this and their shoulder back, and their posture is going to be straight. If you're doing couples photos, couples a lot of times will interact with their hands subconsciously. They'll hold their hands, they'll touch something. You want to make sure the hand is placed in an appropriate way and shows intimacy. If you are working with a client, say it's like a branding client, and they want a really sassy, bold photo, sometimes they'll have their hands sort of like maybe setting out on a rock or like a ledge in front of them. They're like leaning forward, or they might be sitting down, have a pose that's kind of like this. Really constructing a body and constructing hands depends on the individual, and you have to be good at reading visual messages and how that's going to relay to anyone that looks at that photo. Stuff like this, stuff like, you know, this, they all say different things. If someone's standing like this, they probably look pissed off. If someone's doing this, they're probably on a cliff getting like an Instagram photo. So it really depends on, you know, what your client wants, what kind of image you're trying to get. If you want something that's more candid, I highly suggest, you know, just engaging with that person during the shoot. Even I've seen posing cards where they'll have like, you know, whisper something dirty in their ear or something like that. And that's where you'll get a lot of natural reactions, and telling them to do movements, telling them to start from there and run towards the camera, twirl your girlfriend or your boyfriend, whoever it is, and that'll get you more candid photos.
Thank you so much for watching our videos, and a big thank you to Anna for coming here and using her time to show us and to show you the 5 best tips for beginning photography. Don't forget also to follow Anna on all of her social medias platforms. Her Instagram is Annalise with an S photo. Annalise photo. Not photos, just photo.
Just photo.
Annalise photo. And her website is also annalisephotography.com. And I will definitely put it in the description and put it on the screen because I probably just messed that up. But it's all good. So, as always, make sure you
Like,
and
comment,
and
subscribe.
and also don't forget to put on those push notifications so you can be notified each and every time we post a new video. And as always,
Thank you for doing live with us.
peace.